What happens when a sponge that has cleaned hundreds of messes goes up against a brand new sponge and a premium heavy-duty sponge? Most people think the answer is obvious. The old sponge is dirty, the new sponge is fresh. The premium sponge costs more, so it should win. But when I put all three through the same extreme cleaning tests, the results were not what I expected. One sponge started falling apart almost immediately. One sponge looked like it was winning until the final challenge. And one sponge did something that completely changed the way I look at cleaning tools. Today, these three sponges are entering the ultimate cleaning battle. The old sponge, the new sponge, and the premium sponge. Only one will survive every test. Before the battle begins, I need to make one thing clear. This is not about which sponge looks the nicest when it comes out of the package. A sponge can look perfect and still fail when it faces real cleaning problems. The real question is simple. Which sponge can handle the pressure? For this experiment, all three sponges will face the exact same challenges. Same amount of dirt. Same cleaning surface. Same pressure. Same number of scrubbing movements. No sponge gets an advantage. First up is the appearance test. The old sponge has already been through a lot. It has lost its original shape. The edges are softer. The texture feels different. And after months of use, the tiny spaces inside the sponge that once helped trap dirt are now filled with everything it has collected. The new sponge looks completely different. The fibers are fresh. The shape is perfect. The surface feels firm. It looks like the obvious favorite. Then there is the premium sponge. It is thicker, denser, and designed to handle tougher cleaning jobs. But looks can be misleading. The first challenge is something every kitchen sponge faces: a heavy grease test. Grease is one of the biggest enemies of cleaning tools. It sticks, it spreads, and it can quickly make a sponge feel useless. Each sponge gets the same amount of greasy residue. The old sponge goes first. At the beginning, it actually performs better than expected. Because it is already softened from previous use, it moves easily across the surface. But after a few passes, something starts happening. The sponge begins pushing the grease around instead of removing it. The surface looks cleaner in some areas, but the sponge itself is becoming overloaded. The new sponge enters next. The difference is immediate. The fresh fibers grab onto the grease instead of simply spreading it. For a moment, it looks like the new sponge might take the lead. But then the premium sponge enters. The thicker structure creates more pressure against the surface. With every scrub, more grease disappears. The first round goes to the premium sponge. But this battle is far from over. Because grease is only one type of challenge. The next test is where many cleaning tools fail. Dried-on food. Everyone has experienced this. A plate sits too long. A pan gets forgotten. A mess turns from easy cleaning into a serious challenge. The three sponges now face a hardened layer of dried food. The old sponge starts struggling almost instantly. The soft edges bend too easily. Instead of attacking the mess, it folds around it. The new sponge performs better. The fresh surface creates more friction. It removes some of the buildup. But there is a problem. The harder you push, the faster the sponge starts losing its shape. Then comes the premium sponge. At first, it does not look much different. But after a few seconds, the advantage becomes obvious. The stronger material keeps its structure. It continues applying pressure instead of collapsing. Piece by piece, the dried food starts breaking away. Another win for the premium sponge. But now, we move into the durability test. Because a sponge that cleans well but falls apart quickly is not really a winner. Each sponge will face repeated scrubbing. Same surface. Same number of strokes. The goal is to see which one survives. The old sponge enters first. After repeated scrubbing, the damage is impossible to ignore. The texture has changed. The corners are worn down. And the sponge that started this challenge already looking old is now close to retirement. The new sponge enters. This is where things get interesting. It performs well for a while. It feels strong. It looks like it could compete with the premium sponge. But after enough pressure, the fresh structure begins breaking down. The premium sponge takes its turn. And this is where the difference becomes clear. Instead of flattening out, it keeps its shape. Instead of losing power, it keeps scrubbing. The premium sponge is not just surviving. It is maintaining performance. But there is still one final challenge. The challenge that reveals the biggest difference. A stain removal test. Because sometimes the hardest messes are not the biggest ones. They are the ones that refuse to disappear. 3 identical surfaces. 3 identical stains. 3 sponges. The old sponge gets the first attempt. At first, it makes progress. But the longer it scrubs, the less effective it becomes. The sponge is fighting against its own condition. The new sponge takes over. The results are impressive. It removes more than the old sponge. It is fresh. It has energy. It is exactly what most people expect from a brand new cleaning tool. But then comes the premium sponge. And within seconds, the difference becomes obvious. The stain that resisted the others starts disappearing. The stronger material creates more consistent cleaning power. The sponge stays firm. The surface becomes cleaner. And the final results reveal the champion. The old sponge proved something important. A sponge can still work even after a lot of use. But there is a limit. The new sponge showed why replacing cleaning tools matters. Fresh materials can make a huge difference. But the premium sponge showed why some cleaning tools are built differently. It survived every challenge. It kept its shape. It maintained its power. And in this cleaning championship, the premium sponge takes the victory. But this experiment created an even bigger question. If a sponge can survive these tests, what happens when we put it against completely different cleaning weapons? Because a sponge is not always the toughest tool in the room. In the next battle, we are taking cleaning competition to another level. A kitchen sponge, a bathroom brush, and steel wool. 3 completely different tools. 3 different designs. 1 brutal challenge. Which one can handle the toughest messes? That battle is called kitchen sponge versus bathroom brush versus steel wool. The toughest tool survived. You do not want to miss what happens when these cleaning tools go head-to-head. Because the winner is not the one most people expect. Click into the next battle and watch the toughest cleaning tool fight for survival.